Quite recently, there was a discussion on Pyongyang regarding Kim Il-sungism, Kim Jong-ilism, and again its relation to Marxism-Leninism. Comrade Shane made an excellent video on this channel titled Kim Il-sungism, Kim Jong-ilism and Marxism-Leninism. I highly recommend that you check out that video first, as it provides a deeper elucidation of the philosophical interconnection between the two ideals. One of the points raised in the discussion was in regards to the omission of the phrase Marxism-Leninism in general conversation on the Juche idea and Kim Il-sungism, Kim Jong-ilism. I touched upon this topic in one of my previous videos, 4 misconceptions about Juche. However, I feel it is high time to discuss this problem in greater depth. The disbelief of the DPRK's position as a socialist authority, based purely on its self-identity and self-reference, is an idea upheld by bourgeois thinkers who say that they have abandoned communism for the sake of ethno-nationalism or some other outlandish idea. However, there seems to be a tendency of some leftists to also do the same, discard the DPRK's achievements because Marxism-Leninism has supposedly disappeared. There are some who go on about holding the DPRK at arm's length, claiming that they support them in their anti-imperialist struggle and nothing further, which to my mind demonstrates an understanding of the form of Korea, but not an understanding of their substance. The form of the DPRK is that it is a Juche-orientated socialist state progressing under the banner of Kim Il-sungism, Kim Jong-ilism. Standing from this position, at first it may seem like communism or Marxism-Leninism is nowhere to be found. To find these, we must discuss what is the substance of the Juche idea. The way one refers to oneself ideologically doesn't necessarily mean that any and all others are omitted. When we use the word apple, it refers to a fruit with a certain form of taste, texture, smell, and so on. In this case, apple is the signifier. It points us in the direction of the signified, the actual material object with its certain types and properties and so on. For the signifier of Juche, its signified is both its material practical reality as well as its theoretical contributions, yet it seems as if, to some extent, the word Juche has either purposely or not lost its signified. For some reason, the Juche idea seems to be one of, if not the only, ideology which is frequently referred to without consideration for what the ideology actually consists of, its signified, its substance. The term Juche is used in lieu of Marxism-Leninism and Juche, or Marxism-Leninism and Kim Il-sungism, or MLJ, or MLKK, or MLKKJ, or whatever else. The fact that the DPRK doesn't constantly refer to itself as both does not necessarily mean that the phrase omitted from general day-to-day use is also omitted from the word used. Marxism-Leninism is not necessarily omitted from Juche just because the latter is used and not the former. The truth of the matter is that the Juche idea has a rich backlog of theoretical and practical development. It has grown and developed over the course of the 20th century. To take the position that Juche has eradicated Marxism-Leninism just because the theoretical and practical problems within the DPRK are considered from the Juche perspective primarily is to ignore what the Juche idea's theory and practice is. If we were to follow that logic back through the decades, we could conclude that all orthodox Marxists in the late 19th century had none of their ideas based in Hegelian philosophy. We refer to them as Marxist, so by the above logic, therefore, the ideology has no connection or relation to any other. The communists of that time made their theoretical and practical considerations from the position of the orthodox Marxist outlook. To say, therefore, that it has abandoned the preceding theory of Hegelian philosophy outright is to know nothing of Marxism's theoretical and practical development. Just like to say Juche has abandoned Marxism-Leninism is to know nothing of Juche's theoretical and practical development. When we study the principles of Marxism, we can clearly see the connection Marxism had with the preceding theory of dialectics developed by Hegel, as well as with the labour theory of value developed by Adam Smith. The position of the Hegelian philosophy, for example, was studied and developed by Marx and Engels. They considered in depth the correctness of the dialectical process. The universal law of opposites is just one example of the principles they brought forward from the preceding theory. However, they also discarded and re-evaluated the historical limitations of such theory too. To stay with the dialectical example, they understood the limitations of the idealist approach to the dialectical method, and instead brought it onto the new materialist plane. We can see that the orthodox Marxist ideology was heavily rooted in the Hegelian ideology, working on its achievements and re-evaluating its limitations. It can therefore be said that the Marxist ideology is inconceivable when separated from the preceding Hegelian ideology, or theories forwarded by Smith. To remove the latter is to also remove the former. The same holds true for Juche, or Kim Il-sungism, Kim Jong-ilism. The vast majority of works penned by Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, and other Korean social scientists frequently discuss the relation between the new Juche philosophical principles and the preceding theory's principles. Even a cursory study of the Juche classics are filled with references to dialectics, Marxism, Leninism, and their achievements, drawbacks, and so on. Much as how the Marxist classics make numerous references to the preceding Hegelian theory. Another point of importance to discuss is the fact that the DPRK removed the word communism from their constitution in 2009. The anti-DPRK camp used this rather irrelevant event as concrete proof that the DPRK has abandoned communism. To reiterate again, if People's Career has truly given up communism, and as well, therefore, Marxism-Leninism, then the ideology, which has supposedly replaced it outright, would completely fall apart. The Juche idea is a new idea, which has discovered new principles. However, it is firmly based within the principles discovered by Marx, Engels, and Lenin. I think Kim Jong-il said it best in The Juche Philosophy is a New Revolutionary Philosophy. Quote, "The Juche view of the world, that the world is dominated and transformed by man, is inconceivable separately from the materialist dialectical understanding of the essence of the objective material world and the general laws of its motion." A major point within the Juche idea is the elucidation of the laws of the socio-historical movement. The socio-historical movement has its own peculiar law, something which will be discussed by Comrade Shane in his upcoming videos detailing the socio-historical principles. The explanation of these laws are prefaced with the laws of the material world, the dialectical materialist laws. On this, Kim Jong-il stated, quote, "Of course, the social movement has something in common with the natural movement, is that it is also a motion of material. The social movement, too, is governed by the universal laws of the material world. So clearly there is a deep connection between the laws discovered by Marxism-Leninism and the ones discovered by Juche. Indeed, it is evident that the founders of the Juche philosophy paid deep attention to the principles of the preceding philosophy in order to discover the new theory. In fact, regarding dialectics, Kim Jong-il said, quote, "The Juche philosophy regards the materialist dialectic as its premise." Of course, this is all referring to Juche and dialectical materialism specifically. However, it provides proof that to remove Marxist-Leninist principles from Juche is to destroy Juche itself. In fact, in relation to dialectics and Juche, Kim Jong-il even admits himself that removing the former would destroy the latter. Quote, "From the idealistic view that the world is something mysterious, you cannot draw the conclusion that man dominates the world. And from the metaphysical view that the world is immutable, you cannot infer that man can transform the world." We can establish then quite clearly that not only do the Juche ideological texts contain a multitude of references to the preceding theory and the relationship between the two, but furthermore, the authors on a number of occasions recognized that Juche is inconceivable without it. This line holds true even after the removal of the word communism from the Constitution, as a number of new books which have been published after 2009 make reference to Marxism-Leninism. For example, the booklet released in 2014 titled "The Torch of Juche That Illuminates Human Society" contains references to Marx, Lenin, and so on. It even contains quotes by Kim Il-sung not only mentioning Marxism-Leninism, but also talking about the correctness of its ideas. Furthermore, all of the works which were published before 2009, which spoke of Marxism-Leninism, in no way, shape or form had these references removed when they were re-released after 2009. The day-to-day practice of the Juche idea within it also contains the practice of Marxism-Leninism's classic principles. As the Torch of Juche that illuminates the world states, quote, "Lenin made the transition from capitalism to socialism possible." The principles developed and forwarded by Lenin, who made socialism possible, include elements such as, but not limited to, democratic centralism, the dictatorship of the proletariat, and the vanguard party. The reason I have selected these elements in particular is because, although again multiple references to them can be found in the ideological texts of Juche, they can also be found by a quick scan of the country's constitution. In regards to the proletarian dictatorship, the Constitution states, quote, Article 12, "The state shall adhere to the class line and strengthen the dictatorship of people's democracy so as to firmly defend the people's power and socialist system against all subversive acts and hostile elements at home and abroad." For democratic centralism, quote, Article 5, "All state organs in the Democratic People's Republic of Korea are formed and function on the basis of democratic centralism." On a side note, if you wish to read more on Juche's relation to democratic centralism, then I highly recommend reading "Abuses of Socialism Are Intolerable." And finally, on the vanguard party, quote, Article 11. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea shall conduct all activities under the leadership of the Workers' Party of Korea. Also, in Socialism is a Science, Kim Jong-il states, quote, "In the past, the working class party was mainly considered a weapon in class struggle. The working class party should naturally wage class struggle, however," end quote. Kim Jong-il continues on to discuss the party's important role as a servant of the people. It is clear, however, that yet again Marxism-Leninism serves as the basis for all principles. Again, to reiterate what Kim Jong-il said, Marxism-Leninism is Juche's premise, the baseline. Without the former, the latter would not exist. As the premise of Juche, the structure and function of the socialist state is clearly formed and built upon this premise. The final point to mention is that the DPRK's social scientists are heavily advised to study and become familiar with Marxism-Leninism, referred to in the DPRK as the classics. Kim Jong-il constantly said that it is important for social scientists to do so, otherwise they'll fail to fully grasp the essence of the Juche idea completely. Kim Jong-il once said, for example, quote, "Our scientists and people must study and know the Juche idea, but they must also know the philosophical ideas of Marxism-Leninism. The social scientists in particular must be well acquainted with the preceding philosophy. It is important to distinguish limitations and immaturity along with progressive and positive aspects." To conclude, it is clear that the Marxist-Leninist ideology runs deep within the veins of the Juche idea. The latter builds on the former and is inconceivable without it. Of course, this essay hasn't discussed in depth the actual philosophical and theoretical connections between the two. That is saved for Comrade Shane's Juche lessons. Instead, I hope this has served as an expose to the relationship between the two and that it does in fact exist. The Juche idea may be a new revolutionary philosophy, but it could not have come to fruition without Marxism-Leninism's work of obliterating the bourgeois reactionary philosophies of the past and its lifting of socialism onto a new scientific plane. Socialism is a science, and the victory of it is inevitable. Because of this truth, the socialist theory develops upon the scientific basis of the implementation of theory, the assessment of its practice, and the forwarding of new theory. We must understand that the founders of the Marxist-Leninist philosophy could not provide a clear explanation of the world of socialism beyond presupposition and prediction. Putting those principles into practice caused certain practical and theoretical problems to arise, problems which, in my humble opinion, were not answered by the socialist societies of the 20th century and, to some extent, led to their downfall. If you wish to learn more about the Juche view of the frustration of socialism, then please let us know. To reiterate, this is not to say that Marxism-Leninism is a failure by any means, and clearly the theory and practice of it is alive and well in people's career. We just need to understand where its limitations lie. The Juche philosophy has provided answers to a multitude of problems which have arisen in the course of building socialism under the guidance of Marxism-Leninism. A great deal of the Juche idea can only come to fruition under the socialist system which Lenin provided a clear path towards. Overall, it could be concluded that the Juche idea is the science behind the governing of the socialist state.